Alrighty, folks. Hajim Zero here, back for another TV review. Turn off the light there. Hopefully, somewhat better. Hopefully, this is the granddaddy of the much traffic on my channel. This is The Walking Dead season one, and it's the current television show I'm watching. Strict religiously right now. Like, I really don't watch that much TV anymore like I used to. Unlike some of the other stuff that used to come on TV, it's just that nowadays it's not really that much good stuff on TV. It's just usually reality shows or some other crap. But I'm gonna dive right in. Technically, the theme of it by the title on its own, but later I'm going to tell you the real meaning of the show. Uh, is that it's the zombie apocalypse. It starts off in Atlanta, Georgia, or just Georgia in general. Um, and it's pretty much, the basic survival from the zombies. And this show is actually based off of a comic book by Robert Kirkman. And it's pretty much somewhat of the same story. They just flip the scenarios. And of course, writing a comic book and doing a TV show are two different things. And I'm going to talk about the comic book a little bit as well, but I'm talking about the show first. So, with the show, you know, um, the main drama in the beginning was the main character Rick Grimes, who's a police officer in King County, looking for his wife and child when he goes into a coma after a shootout. And the good drama or the good ratings for the beginning of this show, I think it was built on that. I was really kind of expecting them to stretch it out a little bit because that is a good drama overall, and in reality, it is a small possibility if you will find them or not. So I think that's what brought in a lot of viewers for the first season. And to be honest, I never read the comic book first, and I think because when I was in Barnes and Noble, I saw it, and I loved zombie films before then. 28 Days Later and Dawn of the Dead and even the original Night of the Living Dead were the three base movies for the zombie film that I personally loved watching. I didn't watch Dawn of the no, no, not, I didn't watch Night of the Living Dead until much later, and Dawn of the Dead was the remake, the 2004 remake, not the original one, because the 2004 one was a tad bit more scarier because the zombies were actually running and had moments with the shaky cam and all that. But I'll talk about that film later because I'm also going to review it. That'll be much, much, much later. But what was the point I was going to make? Oh, for a while, even before The Walking Dead, when I was watching 28 Days Later and Dawn of the Dead, I was wondering what Kirkman was saying was that he really wanted to see where the story kept going. He hated the fact that it just ended. And the thing is, with Romero's original Dead trilogy, it was technically one story, like night, dawn, and day. And the continuity is really all over the place because eventually they did Return of the Living Dead 3 and Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead. So the original three films, I want to say it's implied it's the same movie or it's the same continuity, but they never really said that. And even at the time, it was more a reflection of what's going on in society. And the same thing with The Walking Dead right now. It's someone's going to the basic human, instinct of what to do and how, the characters slash people would act and react. And, you know, the first season, it did lay out what the rest of the series was going to be about, what the threats really were. It's like for example, I think episode 3, which was Vatos, it hinted a lot that human beings could be a threat. But if you watch the rest of the episode, it was a nice flip on the head. And even with the opposing characters that had took Glenn hostage, which was another character in the show, one that I think T Dog and another additional character was saying that I guess the world has changed, and Guillermo, who's the one leader that took Glenn, he was like, no, the world was always the same. And thinking about it right now, it is kind of true. Some people don't like this show because of the violence and whatnot, but if they really took time to watch it, it is no different from what's going on right now. The only difference is that civilization hasn't been ripped under us to the point where, we can't really get punished for certain things anymore. Like, once the chaos and the panic starts, once we're fending on our own, it's no different from this. The fear can still be there with the zombies not being there or not. And even Andrew Lincoln said that he based his performance off of Gary Cooper and Viggo Mortensen and another similar film to this, where it was some kind of post-apocalyptic scenario, except there were no zombies. It was just no civilization. Viggo Mortensen was the main character, and he had a child with him, and that's what he said he based off of. I can't remember the name of the movie, but I remember looking it up at one point after hearing about it. So it was a very nice, interesting take, because the more I was reading the review on this movie, I was like, this sounds like The Walking Dead, just a tad bit. These two main characters are Monica, Rick and Carl, and ironically, he stated that, he watched that film to get that feeling vibe. And I mentioned Gary Cooper because he's like a cowboy, Western like actor, and looking at, Rick Grimes, he fits that mold very, very well in the show and in the comic. The zombies, of course, they have rules. They move very, very slow. They're driven by smell, sound. That's what attracts them to eat them. That's pretty much the main basis of the rules. And again, I'm not gonna, spoil that much of what happens on the show, but it will come out eventually. Especially when we get to season 2, there's a big thing with the zombies that the audience as well as the characters didn't know at a certain point, but Rick spills into season 2 because they go to the CDC, and the doctor there tells him something, whispering before he leaves. And that was another interesting thing about the show. It was a CDC episode, and the funny thing, Kirkman said that he now regrets it, but I really think it did is justice in keeping the mystery. I was assuming he didn't like it because it took out the lure of what the zombies are, but at the same time, it is still never revealed that much, and I think that was his ultimate, concern. It hasn't revealed, how and why and what, with the whole zombie plague, and then not to mention when people turn, it's at different times. It's not an immediate turn or half an hour or a day or whatever time span. It is left up and buried, and that's what I liked about it. And even they said on IMDb, it was I got a yawn. Hate that. Hate yawning and talking. They did say it was a continuity error, and eventually I'm going to talk about that because that is a small semi-spoiler, but I'm going to save it for season 2 with the whole zombie plague by itself. But I like the CDC episode, because it, Kirkman also said that up to that point, that doctor was the biggest threat that they did run into, because he eventually tried to kill them all by blowing up the whole facility. And, it was a big, threat to them. The good thing is that he didn't put a gun to their head. They eventually left and made the choice, to leave. He didn't really hold them hostage at one point. And, Rick was grateful for it, but Jenner has said there's going to come a day, where you won't be grateful. And even me messing up that line, it comes back later to season 7, and again, I'm going to talk about that when that comes there. And immediately when he had said that, I personally knew it was really implying, you think that I'm bad or the zombies are bad, you're going to come across some people who are much, much worse if you want to continue living. The threat, and he already knew, the threat won't be just the zombies, it's going to be everything else that's out there. So, I knew it for a fact, and I want to say I definitely knew, even before I read the comic book, right around when season 2 was out. And with the comic book that I read, it was the big thick condominium. It pretty much covered season 1 all the way to the end of season 4 at that point, right after they leave the prison. So again, I'm gonna get to that. And when I was reading it, it made complete sense. I was like, oh, okay. I was right about this, and it is a lot nastier. And yeah. But the first season had 6 episodes. I think AMC, they did that on purpose. Not to mention it matched with the comic book. With the first arc, it was 6 issues anyway, so it was nice to have that mirror image. And the CDC was a nice additional episode. To filling in that gap, because that didn't happen in the book. But I like what they're doing with the show. They are putting up, some of these episodes to keep people guessing. And what Frank Darabont has said, we'll meet you back on the path. We're taking a detour. And I really like that, because it is open-ended to what the next terror is going to be. So, or the next, unprepared thing that's going to happen. I really like that. So, going to the comic book a little bit, the comic book is a lot more darker and more graphic. And again, once we get down the path, I'm going to talk about the similarities to the comic book to the show. And pretty much with season 1, all the 6 issues at that point, they matched with the episodes. They moved a couple things around, and they changed a couple scenarios. Like, I think when Glenn and Rick put on the zombie guts to fool the zombies because of the smell, they did it on the show to distract them and lure them away. Versus in the comic book, they did it to get a couple of guns. Yeah. So they changed that whole scenario completely, and they added a couple new characters. The 2 most notable characters that follow deep into the series, who are brand new, are the Dixon brothers, and he's actually on the screen right now with the crossbow. Norman Reedus and Michael Rooker play Merle and Daryl Dixon, and I like their addition to the show as well. Because the funny thing, at one point, Daryl had become so popular that at one point in the book, when we saw a character with a crossbow, people thought it was Daryl in the book, but it was another character, which ironically they have a odd relationship on the TV show now, which I'm also going to eventually talk about. But it was kind of funny because that didn't hit me until I was watching the premiere, and I was like, oh yeah, this character came out, right when the show was out, around season 2, when Daryl had started getting popularity, and people thought that was him. And ironically, both characters' names begin with a D, so it was kind of funny seeing that. So, I remember Rob Explain was saying that or a Comics Explain, he was saying one of the differences was, with them being on the show, with Daryl being on the show, he's a good hunter and tracker, so that gives them more resource for them to survive a little bit longer, versus city folk going off their instinct, which was in the comic book. And another difference is, which lingers into season 2, is the weather. Season 2, not season 2, the comic book was more realistic with the weather environments versus the TV show, because if anyone that watches the TV show now, you ever notice it never snowed. They had heavy rain, do something to the zombies, and that was believable. But I was more a tad bit sad and teed around season 2, because that's when I was expecting snow environment, because in Georgia, and I'm saying this because I live here, and ironically I've been on the set of season 1 of The Walking Dead. I'm not in any of the shots, but it was much more of an accident, and I'll talk to you guys about it in the comment section if you want to know. But the summers are very, very hot, and which is understandable. I think they shot this in the summer at that time in 2010, and it came out on Halloween in October, and it was still pretty hot. It's October now, or it's gonna be in another week of me shooting this. So yeah, the weather is pretty hot, but in the winters it gets really, really cold. And recently, I think the past 2 years, I wasn't here. I was in North Carolina. It snowed and it completely shut down. As a matter of fact, one of the funny shots of I-85 South coming into Atlanta, it looked like The Walking Dead, where that famous, Walking Dead season 1 poster, where all the cars are on the left side trying to get out, and the whole right side is clear. That's pretty much what the snow had looked like for real, for real. So when I saw that, I was like, I really hope they incorporate snow, because they did it twice in the book and they did a very good job at doing it. And I was really waiting for it on the show, and even in season 2, Rick had even mentions it, if the snow affects them or not. So again, it was one thing I was waiting to see, but they never did it. And I'm gonna leave this off on a note real quick. I was watching a zombie apocalypse documentary, and they were saying the good thing is that if it really does happen, it's not it's not a matter of how. It's a matter of when it's going to happen, because the CDC has already had protocols on their website in case this disaster does happen. And I'm not really that concerned about the zombies as much. I just hope they move slow. They don't move that fast, like the Dawn of the Dead or 28 Days Later. Even though they say 28 Days Later really isn't a zombie film, it's just people who are fixed on rage. And also they starve to death. You just have to wait it out and survive that long. But going back to the matter, I'm not that concerned, because recently we had a hurricane. The hurricane was in Houston, and there was another one in Florida, and it rained very heavily, and there was heavy winds. So, if you really think about it, the weather can be your best friend. So, if a good herd of them are wiped out, herds is something else I'm going to talk about in season 2. If a good chunk of herd of them are wiped out, that majority of the threat is going to be gone. So same thing, that's why I said I was waiting for them to utilize the snow, because in the book, some of the zombies did have been frozen and they weren't much of a threat. The only threat they can be is if you have to go somewhere and it's in a frozen lake or something, and then you fall in, or a zombie is there and it tries to come at you, and then both of you guys fall in. So you might die of hypothermia or something like that. But that's pretty much what it is. And also some of the animals, in The Walking Dead, animals don't get infected; they just get eaten on. Some of the animals could possibly attack the zombies. And again, ironically, later in season 7, there's one person with one particular animal, and I was excited to see it, because it was a big hyped up moment. But if you really think about it, that's what what could realistically happen. The threat of the zombies might be there for a couple of months, but say like a good rain or good snow or a hurricane, that'll take them out. Because they're all walking around and you got debris and shit, flying and hitting them. So I'm not that concerned. And then probably at that point, the biggest concern will be human beings, because even if the zombie threat is eradicated, not that many people, possibly, depending how long it takes, will want to go back into main society and rebuild civilization. We possibly could still be living, those barbaric, rule, ways and rule. So, that's pretty much my review. Can't wait to get to season 2, because, me critiquing and reviewing and talking into the camera to you guys about it, it was one of my main inspirations into my storytelling, because like I said, I've been waiting to see a zombie story like this for a while. It's just at the time when I was at Barnes & Noble, I came in right in the middle of it, and I usually don't pick up something unless I go way back to the beginning of how it started. I hate coming in the middle. I think what I was reading was when Laurie had died in the comic book, and I was looking at it, and she was holding a baby, and I was like, man, that's just messed up. And my stomach had turned. But now, since the show is out, I think it was at the end of season 2, I bought the Condominium, and I had read it, and I was already prepared for season 3 of what was going to happen bit by bit, because like I said, the Condominium, it went all the way to the middle of season 4. So, and you know, the show wasn't even at season 4. It just started. It just ended season 2 and was going into season 3. You know, it gave more time for people to read it probably once the popularity of the show was already there, and especially what happened at the end of season 2. But yeah, that's my review. Oh wow, 20 minutes. And I see you guys in season 2, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.